What would you do if someone in uniform raised their hand to your child, 30,000 feet in the air, with nowhere to go? Now imagine that child is 6 years old. Imagine the entire cabin goes silent. Imagine a faint trace of blood at the corner of her mouth. And imagine the man sitting beside her, dressed like an ordinary passenger in economy class, calmly picks up his phone and erases $800 million in less than 60 seconds. This wasn't a movie. It wasn't staged. It wasn't exaggerated. One slap, one father, one phone call, and an airline's future changed forever. Stay with me, because what happened after that call is even more shocking than the slap itself. Before we begin, I want you to comment below and tell me where you're watching from right now. City, country, anywhere in the world. Because what happened on this flight shook passengers from New York to Nairobi, from London to Lagos. And trust me, by the end of this story, you'll understand why one single slap in economy class cost someone $800 million in less than 10 minutes. The boarding process had been smooth that afternoon at Gate 42. Families shuffled in with backpacks and neck pillows. Business executives typed aggressively on their phones. Flight attendants smiled the kind of polished smiles that come from years of training. Among the passengers was a small girl named Ava. She was 6 years old, with two neat braids tied in pink ribbons and a tiny glitter backpack shaped like a butterfly. She walked carefully beside her father, Daniel Carter, holding his hand with both of hers like she never wanted to let go. Daniel didn't look like anything special at first glance. Plain navy hoodie, dark jeans, simple sneakers, no watch, no jewelry, no designer luggage. Just a quiet man traveling with his daughter. They were seated in economy. Seat 24B and 24C. Ava had never flown before. Her excitement was impossible to hide. She pressed her face against the window before the plane had even started moving. "Daddy, are we going above the clouds?" she whispered. Daniel smiled softly. Higher than the clouds. 2 rows ahead stood a senior flight attendant named Vanessa Clark. She had worked for the airline for nearly 15 years. Sharp posture, immaculate uniform, perfect bun. She ran her cabin like a military unit. And today, she was already irritated. The flight was full. A delayed departure had made passengers restless, and she did not like restless passengers. As the plane taxied toward the runway, Ava began kicking her feet gently against the seat in front of her. Not aggressively, not intentionally disruptive, just nervous energy from a 6-year-old experiencing her first flight. The man in front turned around once. Daniel leaned forward. "Ava, sweetheart, feet still please." She nodded immediately. For a few minutes, everything was calm. Then turbulence hit. It wasn't severe, but it was sudden. The plane dipped slightly. Overhead, bins rattled. A few passengers gasped. Ava panicked. She grabbed the seat in front of her, and her foot thumped against it again. The man turned sharply this time. "Control your kid." Daniel's jaw tightened. "She's scared. I've got her." Vanessa had been walking down the aisle when she heard the commotion. She approached with that tight professional smile that never reached her eyes. "Sir, is there a problem?" The passenger in front spoke first. "Yes, that child keeps kicking my seat." Vanessa looked down at Ava. Ava looked up at her, wide-eyed. "I'm sorry," Ava whispered. Vanessa's voice hardened. "Young lady, you need to sit properly." Daniel placed a protective hand on his daughter's shoulder. "She's nervous. It's her first flight." Vanessa's patience snapped in a way no one expected. Then maybe she shouldn't be flying if she can't behave. Several passengers turned their heads. Daniel's voice lowered. "Excuse me." And then it happened. Ava shifted again, and her small shoe brushed the seat. Vanessa reached down abruptly. Her hand moved faster than anyone processed. A sharp sound cracked through the cabin. Ava's head jerked to the side. The entire row froze. For half a second, there was silence so heavy it felt unreal. Then Ava began to cry. Not loud at first. Just stunned, confused sobs. Daniel stared in disbelief. A faint red line appeared at the corner of Ava's lip where her teeth had caught the inside of her mouth. A tiny trace of blood welled up. Not dramatic, not gushing, but enough. Enough to change everything. "What did you just do?" Daniel's voice was dangerously calm. Vanessa straightened. "She needs discipline." A passenger across the aisle gasped. Someone else lifted a phone. Ava clung to her father now, small shoulders shaking. Daniel pulled a handkerchief from his pocket and gently pressed it to her lip. "You slapped my daughter." She was being disruptive. Vanessa replied, avoided eye contact. Daniel stood slowly. "Get the captain," he said quietly. "You need to sit down, sir," Vanessa snapped. Daniel looked at her in a way that made her step back without understanding why. "I said," he repeated, voice steady and controlled. "Get the captain." Whispers filled the cabin. Phones were recording openly now. Vanessa signaled another crew member, trying to regain authority. "Sir, if you continue to escalate, we will have you removed upon landing." Daniel's expression didn't change. "Removed?" he asked softly. Ava sniffled against his chest. And that's when three men from different parts of the cabin stood up almost simultaneously. One wore a tailored suit and had been sitting in first class. Another was near the exit row. The third closed his laptop slowly and removed his glasses. They weren't random passengers. They were members of Daniel Carter's executive security team. Vanessa felt the shift before she understood it. The suited man approached calmly. "Sir, would you like us to intervene?" Vanessa blinked. "Intervene? This is my aircraft cabin." Daniel finally revealed the smallest hint of who he was. "No," he told the security men gently. "Not yet." The plane had leveled out now, but the turbulence inside the cabin was just beginning. The captain was called. When he arrived, Vanessa spoke first, framing the situation as a disruptive child and an aggressive parent. The captain listened carefully. Then he noticed the phone's recording. Then he noticed the three standing men. Then he noticed Daniel. Recognition flickered across his face. He swallowed. "Mr. Carter, I didn't realize you were on board." Vanessa turned slowly. The name meant nothing to her yet, but it would. Daniel looked up calmly. "I prefer flying quietly." The captain's tone shifted immediately. "Of course, we deeply value." Daniel cut him off. "Your flight attendant struck my 6-year-old daughter." The captain's face drained of color. I'm sure there's been a misunderstanding." Daniel gently lifted the handkerchief from Ava's lip. The faint smear of red was visible. The captain saw it, and everything changed. "Vanessa," he said quietly, "step aside." She stared at him. "Captain," she was. "Step aside." Passengers were now openly filming. One woman whispered, "Oh my God, that's Daniel Carter." The name spread down the aisle like electricity. Daniel Carter, founder and majority stakeholder of one of the largest private investment firms in the world. Primary investor in the airline currently carrying them at 30,000 feet. The airline whose latest expansion had been funded by an $800 million liquidity injection from Carter Global Holdings. Vanessa's face lost all color. She looked at Daniel again, this time not as a passenger, but as power. Daniel didn't raise his voice. He didn't threaten. He didn't shout. He simply took out his phone, dialed one number, put it on speaker. "This is Carter," he said calmly. "Initiate immediate withdrawal of all pending capital allocations to Alteris Air." The captain's knees nearly buckled. Vanessa's breath caught. On the other end, a voice responded, "Confirmed, sir. 800 million retracted effective immediately." Effective immediately. There was no anger in his tone. That was what made it terrifying. "Done, sir." The call ended. The silence in the cabin felt heavier than the turbulence had. The captain whispered, "Mr. Carter, perhaps we can discuss." Daniel looked at him. "My daughter was assaulted by your employee." Ava had stopped crying now, but she wouldn't look at anyone except her father. Vanessa opened her mouth to speak, but nothing came out. Passengers kept recording, because everyone understood something historic had just happened. But Daniel wasn't finished. He leaned down and whispered something to Ava. She nodded faintly. Then he looked back at the captain. "We will be speaking again when we land." And that's when the real consequences began. Not loud, not chaotic, just tense in a way that made breathing feel heavier. The captain stood frozen for a moment, calculating damage that couldn't be seen yet. $800 million wasn't just a number. It was aircraft leases, expansion routes, staff salaries, shareholder confidence, future growth. And it was gone, just like that. Vanessa tried to regain composure, but her hands betrayed her. They trembled slightly as she adjusted her uniform jacket. "Sir," she began carefully, "I believe this is being blown out of proportion." Daniel didn't look at her. He was focused on Ava. He knelt slightly, so his eyes were level with hers. "Sweetheart," he said gently, "are you okay?" She nodded, though her lips still stung. The small mark wasn't dramatic, but the shock had settled deeper than the physical pain. "I didn't mean to kick the seat," she whispered. Daniel's expression softened. "I know you didn't. That sentence alone made several passengers visibly emotional. Because the truth was clear to everyone watching. This wasn't discipline. It wasn't safety protocol. It was impatience crossing a line. And now the line had consequences. The captain cleared his throat. "Mr. Carter, perhaps we can relocate you and your daughter to first class for the remainder of the flight." A murmur rippled through the cabin. Daniel finally looked up. "Is that how this works?" he asked quietly. "You strike a child and then offer better seats?" The captain's mouth opened, then closed. Vanessa stepped forward, her pride fighting with rising panic. "I have served this airline with excellence for 15 years. I have never had a complaint." A passenger across the aisle spoke up. "You do now?" Another voice joined. "We all saw it, and we recorded it." Vanessa's breathing became shallow. This was no longer an internal cabin issue. This was evidence. Daniel stood slowly. The three security men shifted subtly, but remained calm. "Captain," Daniel said evenly, "I don't want upgrades. I don't want vouchers. I don't want apologies whispered at 30,000 feet." He glanced around at the phones. "I want accountability." The word landed heavy. The captain nodded quickly. "Of course. Absolutely. Upon landing, we will conduct a full investigation." Daniel's gaze didn't waver. "No. You will remove her from duty immediately." Vanessa's eyes widened. "You can't just." The captain cut her off again, this time without hesitation. "Vanessa, please step to the rear galley." For the first time in her career, she hesitated to obey. But the weight of the cabin's eyes forced her feet to move. As she walked down the aisle, whispers followed her like shadows. The door to the galley closed behind her, and only then did the passengers exhale. Daniel returned to his seat. Ava leaned into him. The plane continued its journey as if nothing historic had just occurred. But on the ground, the shockwave was already spreading. In the airline's corporate headquarters, phones began ringing. The finance department received the alert first. Capital withdrawal confirmed. Liquidity pipeline terminated. Board members were called into emergency session. Stock analysts caught wind within minutes. Shares began to dip. Not crash. Not yet. But the market senses fear faster than people do. Back on the plane, a young woman seated in 22A quietly uploaded her video. No caption, just the footage. The slap. The stunned silence. The call. Within minutes, notifications exploded. By the time the plane began its descent, the clip had been viewed hundreds of thousands of times. And the headline had already been written by strangers online. Billionaire investor pulls $800 million mid-flight after daughter is slapped. Daniel's phone buzzed continuously now. He ignored it. Ava had fallen asleep against his chest. Children have that ability. To crash emotionally and physically all at once. He brushed a braid away from her face gently. The captain made an announcement. "Ladies and gentlemen, we will be landing shortly. We appreciate your patience today." His voice sounded different. Less confident. More careful. Because he knew, when that plane touched ground, cameras would be waiting. The moment the wheels hit the runway, applause broke out unexpectedly. Not for the landing. For Daniel. He didn't acknowledge it. He just held his daughter closer. As the plane taxied to the gate, airport security vehicles appeared outside the window. Not because of a threat, because corporate had called ahead. When the doors opened, uniformed officials boarded immediately. Vanessa was escorted out first. She looked smaller now. Not powerful, not authoritative, just stunned. Passengers filmed openly as she walked down the aisle. Some shook their heads. Some said nothing. Daniel remained seated until the cabin cleared. "Mr. Carter, on behalf of the airline." Daniel stood. "Save it for the board meeting." And then he walked off the aircraft, Ava in his arms. Outside the gate, cameras flashed. Reporters shouted questions. "Mr. Carter, is it true you pulled $800 million? Will you sue the airline? Is your daughter okay?" Daniel didn't answer any of them. He placed Ava gently into a waiting vehicle. His security team formed a quiet barrier. And as the car drove away, the story officially left the airport and entered the world. Within hours, major news outlets picked it up. Commentators debated corporate power, parenting, airline conduct, employee rights. But the video told its own story. There was no spin strong enough to erase what people saw with their own eyes. By evening, Altaris Air stock had dropped 12%. Emergency board meetings stretched past midnight. The CEO attempted to contact Daniel directly. No response. Vanessa, meanwhile, sat in a private office at the airport, still in uniform. human resources, legal counsel, security, all present. Her earlier confidence had evaporated. I was maintaining order, she insisted weakly. Legal counsel responded calmly. You struck a minor. I barely touched her. There is visible injury on video. Vanessa's silence answered the rest. At midnight, an official statement was drafted. Alteris Air is aware of an incident involving a crew member and a minor passenger. The employee has been suspended pending investigation. Suspended, not terminated. The internet didn't like that. By morning, hashtags were trending. Calls for boycott multiplied. Daniel finally made one public statement. Just one. A simple post. No parent should ever have to comfort their child because an adult in authority lost patience. That was it. No anger. No threats. Just a line that echoed. And investors read between those lines. By market open, another 6% drop. Board members began discussing emergency damage control. One suggestion rose quickly. Immediate termination. Public apology. Personal outreach. Because $800 million was just the beginning. Daniel wasn't just money. He was influence. And influence spreads faster than fear. Meanwhile, at home, Ava sat on the couch with an ice pack wrapped in a cloth against her lip. She looked small again. Not viral. Not symbolic. Just 6. Are you mad, Daddy? She asked softly. Daniel knelt in front of her. No, not even at her. He paused, then answered carefully. I'm disappointed. Ava thought about that. Is that worse? Daniel gave a faint smile. Sometimes. And in that quiet living room, far from flashing cameras and boardrooms, the real weight of the story settled. Because this wasn't about revenge. It wasn't about humiliation. It was about a boundary. And the world had just watched what happens when someone crosses the wrong one. But what no one knew yet was that the airline's biggest problem wasn't the $800 million. It was what Daniel planned to do next. The morning after the incident, Alteris Air's headquarters resembled a war zone disguised as an office. Phones rang incessantly. Emails piled up in a digital avalanche. And every manager seemed to be walking around with a pale, haunted look. The boardroom, usually reserved for quarterly earnings and strategic planning, had been converted into an emergency operations hub. Screens displayed live feeds of social media, tracking the spread of the viral video. Each frame of it, a small girl with wide eyes, a trace of blood at her lip, her father's calm, controlled fury, was being dissected and debated by millions. Lawyers huddled in corners, whispering about liability and precedent. Public relations teams typed rapidly, drafting statements that they hoped could contain a storm already too large to manage. Investors were calling, demanding explanations, and threatening to pull their stakes. The CEO, a usually commanding figure, sat silently, staring at the feed of Daniel Carter's announcement. The words were simple, but they carried a weight that no corporate spin could overcome. No parent should ever have to comfort their child because an adult in authority lost patience. Meanwhile, Daniel Carter didn't sit still. His world operated differently than the boardrooms scrambling at Alteris Air. In a quiet, minimalist office far from the cameras, he reviewed the financial consequences. $800 million. Gone. In a heartbeat, but not lost. It had been reallocated to accounts that he controlled, moving faster than any airline's emergency fund could respond. His security team monitored the airport footage, ensuring that nothing or no one could interfere. A small man with a daughter in his arms. Everyone who knew him understood that power wasn't measured by the clothes you wore or the seat you held on a plane. Ava, meanwhile, had become the unintentional symbol of the story. Her photos circulated endlessly online, always taken from that moment in the video. Eyes wide, lips pressed together against the faint trace of blood. Memes, articles, and discussions multiplied. Everyone had an opinion. Was this about parental overreach? Airline authority? A terrifying glimpse of wealth and influence? The questions swirled around the girl who just wanted to experience her first flight. Back at the airport, Vanessa Clark, the flight attendant who had caused the incident, was undergoing a private interrogation. Human resources, legal counsel, and crisis managers were all present. The glossy confidence she had carried for 15 years had disappeared, replaced by confusion, fear, and a dawning realization that this was bigger than any disciplinary action she had ever handled. I was only trying to maintain order, she said, her voice trembling slightly. The child was being disruptive. A lawyer's eyes met hers coldly. The child is 6. She is your passenger, not your subordinate. Your responsibility is safety, not punishment. You struck her. That is assault. Visible on video. Vanessa swallowed. Every defense she had rehearsed evaporated under the scrutiny of undeniable evidence. Her career, reputation, and professional life hung in the balance, and she knew it. Outside, social media continued to explode. Every news outlet had run clips of the incident, often looping the moment when Daniel's calm composure contrasted with the chaos around him. Analysts wrote op-eds about the enormous financial consequences, speculating how quickly an individual with the right resources could disrupt an entire airline. By midday, hashtags were trending worldwide. Hashtag flight slap, hashtag Carter intervention, hashtag child assault in air. Even casual viewers were compelled to comment, share, and debate. Daniel, however, remained composed. He understood something fundamental about influence and perception. Control is quiet, not theatrical. Instead of engaging with reporters, he monitored the situation from a secure location, ensuring that Ava was safe, cared for, and shielded from the frenzy. The girl, blissfully unaware of the financial chaos and viral attention, was simply enjoying her father's presence. He had already planned the next step. Pulling $800 million was a message, but it was only the beginning. The airline had to understand not just that their actions had consequences, but that some boundaries, when crossed, were non-negotiable. That same afternoon, private letters were drafted, addressed to the airline's board members, outlining a series of demands. Safety protocols, stricter training, accountability measures. Each paragraph was calculated, firm, and non-emotional, a precision strike designed to ensure that no similar incident would ever occur again. Inside Altair, panic continued. Executives debated damage control strategies. Stock prices dipped further as analysts predicted potential investor pullouts and lawsuits. The internal culture of the airline, long known for strict hierarchy and rigid enforcement, began to fracture as employees whispered about the incident. Fear replaced authority. Respect replaced obedience. No one knew how to approach a situation where a 6-year-old girl had inadvertently caused a billion-dollar-level shakeup. Daniel's presence was invisible to the world, yet absolute in effect. Security reports confirmed that no unauthorized footage had leaked beyond what passengers had uploaded. Public perception was entirely shaped by the raw, unedited video, a simple moment that spoke louder than any press statement ever could. And while the public debated, Daniel was already analyzing the patterns. What messages were being sent by the airline? How would shareholders react? How could he leverage this situation to protect Ava while simultaneously holding those in authority accountable? By evening, mainstream media outlets ran detailed analyses. Business channels discussed the unprecedented withdrawal of capital. Legal experts debated the implications of using financial leverage to enforce accountability. Parenting blogs focused on the emotional impact of the slap. And Ava? She remained blissfully unaware, cuddled in her father's arms, her small world untouched by the viral storm that surrounded her. The following morning, the airline CEO finally addressed the media. The statement was carefully drafted, overly formal, and noticeably apologetic. Altair deeply regrets the incident on Flight 732. We are conducting a full internal investigation and have suspended the employee involved pending further review. But the public had already seen the video, and no apology, statement, or excuse could skepticism and anger. Calls for reform, compensation, and policy changes grew louder by the hour. Even employees of the airline began to take sides. Some felt empathy for Vanessa, claiming that she was simply enforcing rules under pressure. Others were horrified, insisting that the incident revealed deep flaws in training, conduct standards, and management oversight. Internal emails leaked, further escalating tensions. By the end of the day, the board convened yet another emergency meeting. This time, the tone was different. Fear had entered the room. The name, Daniel Carter, had shifted from a distant, untouchable figure to a direct, undeniable threat. Meanwhile, Daniel had made another strategic move. Using private channels, he began coordinating with legal, financial, and advocacy teams to ensure that any future incidents would not only be prevented but publicly addressed. His influence was subtle, invisible to most, yet absolute. Every action taken by the airline now carried the implicit knowledge that missteps would have immediate consequences. $800 million was just the opening salvo. The real impact would be systemic and enduring. And through it all, Ava remained the same 6-year-old who had simply wanted to see the clouds. Her lip had healed, the trace of blood a mere memory. But in that ordinary girl, the world had witnessed extraordinary power, calm authority, and the undeniable consequence of one simple act crossing a line. The story was far from over. Because while the airline scrambled to respond, Daniel was already planning his next steps, actions that would not only ensure accountability, but also reshape corporate conduct for years to come. The ripple effect had just begun, and no one, not the CEO, not the board, not even Vanessa, could have imagined just how far it would go. The morning after the flight, Alteris Air's headquarters was already a war zone. The boardroom was packed with executives, legal teams, and PR consultants, all speaking in hushed, urgent tones, though every word carried the tension of a courtroom. Screens lined the walls, showing live social media feeds, news channels, and streaming video of the incident. Every clip, replayed frame by frame, showed the slap, Ava's tiny, stunned face, the faint smear of blood at her lip, and Daniel Carter's calm, unshakable presence. Phones rang incessantly. Investors demanded explanations. The legal team drafted emergency memos warning about liability and precedent. Social media managers were frantically responding to posts, though their efforts were almost laughably insufficient. Every attempt at damage control only drew more attention. Every official statement seemed hollow against the raw footage circulating online. The CEO of Alteris Air, normally a commanding presence, sat silently at the head of the table, staring at the screens. His usual confidence had evaporated, replaced with a nervous awareness that one individual, one single passenger, had instantly undone months of corporate planning. Analysts were already speculating that the airline could lose millions more if the public outrage persisted. Inside his private office far from the chaos, Daniel Carter watched it all unfold. He wasn't a man who panicked, and he didn't overreact. He reviewed financial flows, confirming the withdrawal of $800 million in liquidity. Capital had shifted instantly from Alteris Air accounts to accounts he controlled, leaving the airline scrambling. Notifications from his team confirmed every move, every social media spike, every potential risk. Security updates ensured Ava's safety, though she remained blissfully unaware of the chaos her presence had caused. The public, meanwhile, couldn't stop watching. Clips of the incident had gone viral overnight, circulating in every time zone, across every social platform. Parenting forums debated the moral outrage. Should a child ever be disciplined like this? Business analysts debated the power demonstration. How could one man cripple an airline with a single phone call? And the general public was glued, sharing, commenting, and creating memes about the slap and the financial fallout. Vanessa Clark, the flight attendant, had been moved to a private office for questioning. HR personnel, legal counsel, and crisis managers surrounded her. Her hands trembled as she adjusted her uniform, her usual composure shattered. "I was maintaining order," she said, voice quivering. The child, she was disruptive. A lawyer leaned forward, eyes cold and unyielding. "A 6-year-old child, Miss Clark. You struck her. Visible injury on video. You have no defense." Vanessa tried to speak, but the weight of the room pressed down on her. 15 years of authority, control, and professional pride were crumbling. Every whisper, every gaze, every subtle judgment told her she had crossed a line from which Alteris Air's headquarters was already a war zone. The boardroom was packed with executives, legal teams, and PR consultants, all speaking in hushed, urgent tones, though every word carried the tension of a courtroom. Screens lined the walls, showing live social media feeds, news channels, and streaming video of the incident. Every clip, replayed frame by frame, showed the slap, Ava's tiny, stunned face, the faint smear of blood at her lip, and Daniel Carter's calm, unshakable presence. Phones rang incessantly. Investors demanded explanations. The legal team drafted emergency memos warning about liability and precedent. Social media managers were frantically responding to posts, though their efforts were almost laughably insufficient. Every attempt at damage control only drew more attention. Every official statement seemed hollow against the raw footage circulating online. The CEO of Air, normally a commanding presence, sat silently at the head of the table, staring at the screens. His usual confidence had evaporated, replaced with a nervous awareness that one individual, one single passenger, had instantly undone months of corporate planning. Analysts were already speculating that the airline could lose millions more if the public outrage persisted. Inside his private office far from the chaos, Daniel Carter watched it all unfold. He wasn't a man who panicked, and he didn't overreact. He reviewed financial flows, confirming the withdrawal of $800 million in liquidity. Capital had shifted instantly from Air accounts to accounts he controlled, leaving the airline scrambling. Notifications from his team confirmed every move, every social media spike, every potential risk. Security updates ensured Ava's safety, though she remained blissfully unaware of the chaos her presence had caused. The public, meanwhile, couldn't stop watching. Clips of the incident had gone viral overnight, circulating in every time zone, across every social platform. Parenting forums debated the moral outrage. Should a child ever be disciplined like this? Business analysts debated the power demonstration. How could one man cripple an airline with a single phone call? And the general public was glued, sharing, commenting, and creating memes about the slap and the financial fallout. Vanessa Clark, the flight attendant, had been moved to a private office for questioning. HR personnel, legal counsel, and crisis managers surrounded her. Her hands trembled as she adjusted her uniform, her usual composure shattered. "I was maintaining order," she said, voice quivering. The child, she was disruptive. A lawyer leaned forward, eyes cold and unyielding. "A 6-year-old child, Miss Clark. You struck her. Visible injury on video. You have no defense." Vanessa tried to speak, but the weight of the room pressed down on her. 15 years of authority, control, and professional pride were crumbling. Every whisper, every gaze, every subtle judgment told her she had crossed a line from which there was no return. Meanwhile, on the ground, the airline's PR team was desperately trying to control the narrative. Every press release was dissected by social media users and journalists alike. The term "flight slap" became trending worldwide within hours. Calls for boycotts grew louder. Major news networks ran the video repeatedly, analyzing it frame by frame. Every aspect, the child's wide eyes, the tiny streak of blood, Daniel's calm demeanor, was replayed and debated endlessly. Daniel, however, didn't engage publicly. His strategy was calculated. He didn't need to scream. He didn't need to threaten. The power of visibility was enough. The world had seen what happened. That image alone communicated a force no words could amplify. Within hours, the airline stock had dropped sharply. Board members convened emergency meetings to discuss the implications. Lawyers warned that this was not just about public perception, it was about precedent. Any lawsuits, any regulatory investigations, and any social backlash could cost far more than the withdrawn $800 million. Executives argued, panicked, and searched desperately for solutions. They were dealing with a reality that didn't fit their playbooks, an individual's influence outweighing corporate power. Daniel, still unseen by the public, began orchestrating the next phase. Letters were drafted to the airline's board outlining specific demands, full accountability for the staff involved, immediate review and revision of training protocols, and assurance that no other child or passenger would endure such treatment. Every demand was precise, legally sound, and backed by the quiet threat of further financial leverage. At home, Ava remained the same 6-year-old who had only wanted to see the clouds. Her lip had healed. The tiny smear of blood was a memory now. Yet, even in her innocence, she had become the unwitting catalyst for a worldwide spectacle. Daniel only smiled faintly and replied, "We're just making sure it doesn't happen again." Meanwhile, Air's internal culture began to shift. Employees whispered about the incident, debating responsibility, consequences, and authority. Some defended Vanessa, claiming she was only enforcing rules. Others were horrified, calling for sweeping changes in policy and conduct. Internal memos leaked, feeding the fire of public outrage. Fear replaced authority, and even mid-level staff realized that any misstep could now attract unprecedented scrutiny. By the following evening, The CEO issued a formal public apology. Air deeply regrets the incident on Flight 732. The employee involved has been suspended pending investigation. We are committed to reviewing our training and policies to ensure the safety and comfort of all passengers. But the public had already seen the footage. The apology felt insufficient. Social media erupted with criticism, demanding more than a suspension, demanding accountability, and questioning whether the airline understood the gravity of its actions. Daniel's approach remained strategic. Every move was calculated to maximize accountability while protecting Ava. Through private channels, he coordinated with legal, financial, and advocacy teams to ensure the airline could not ignore systemic flaws. Each action they took was subtle but effective, reshaping corporate behavior without the need for public confrontation. The ripple effect was global. Business analysts wrote articles about the extraordinary case of influence demonstrated by Daniel Carter. Parenting forums shared lessons about authority, patience, and the responsibilities of adults in positions of power. News outlets speculated about what this meant for corporate governance, employee conduct, and the unseen consequences of personal accountability. Despite the media frenzy, Daniel's calm and measured approach remained consistent. No threats, no public outrage, no dramatic statements, just quiet, undeniable authority. And while the world debated, the real story continued quietly at home. Ava, safe and cared for, blissfully unaware of the viral storm she had survived. But the story was far from over. Because while Air scrambled to respond, Daniel Carter had already begun planning his next moves, strategic steps that would not only ensure accountability, but also set a precedent for corporate conduct worldwide. The financial leverage, the public scrutiny, the viral power of a simple video, it was all just the beginning. The boardroom at Air was tense enough to crack glass. Floor-to-ceiling windows looked out over the city, but the view went unnoticed. Inside, the air was thick with anxiety, punctuated by the soft hum of fluorescent lights and the clicking of keyboards. Executives huddled around a long, polished table, each with a tablet or printed report, but none were reading. They were reacting, constantly checking live feeds of social media, news channels, and analytics dashboards. The CEO, normally commanding and unflappable, now looked every bit the figure of a man cornered. His hands trembled slightly as he tapped a tablet to track trending hashtags. Hashtag flight slap, hashtag Carter intervention, hashtag child assault in air, all trending worldwide, climbing faster than any PR team could suppress. The CEO's voice was sharp but shaky. We need a plan. Now. Legal, communications, everyone. What do we do next? A senior lawyer, eyes fixed on a spreadsheet of potential liabilities, spoke first. Every second we delay increases exposure. Lawsuits are inevitable. Regulatory bodies are already flagging the incident. And the public backlash? It's exponential. If we don't act decisively, we could see long-term financial consequences beyond $800 million. The PR director, face pale, interjected. We've drafted statements, apologies, and policy revisions. But none of it will satisfy the public or the press. They've seen the video. That video speaks louder than any press release we can issue. The CFO slammed his hands on the table. And the stock is reacting in real time. Analysts are predicting further drops. Investors are calling. If this continues into the next trading session, we may face shareholder revolts, margin calls, and a collapse of confidence. This is beyond a PR problem. It's a corporate existential crisis. Meanwhile, in a quiet, secure office miles away, Daniel Carter observed every move. He didn't need to be loud. He didn't need to threaten. He already had leverage. $800 million was gone from their liquidity pipeline, a simple message with immediate consequences. And the airline's panic proved the point. Authority without accountability is fragile. He picked up a secure line and spoke quietly to his legal team. Monitor the board. Prepare a comprehensive report on the company's governance failures. I want every procedural gap identified. Confirmed. No detail. Understood, sir. Every email, policy, training manual, we're reviewing. Daniel didn't need to watch the stock tickers. He knew the market would respond within minutes of any public statement. His focus was Ava. She was resting now, oblivious to the chaos her presence had sparked, and that was as it should be. He never allowed the spectacle to reach her. The world could wait. Back at Altair, the boardroom erupted into argument. The CEO, attempting to regain control, addressed the group. We've suspended the employee. We've issued statements. What more can we do? The senior lawyer responded, flat and precise. That's not enough. Suspension does not address systemic issues. It does not prevent future incidents. And it does not neutralize the influence of Mr. Carter. A VP leaned forward, whispering almost conspiratorially. Are we talking about legal retaliation? He pulled $800 million. He could pull more. He could destabilize us entirely. Silence fell. The weight of the realization settled like a stone. Daniel Carter wasn't just a wealthy passenger. He wasn't just a father defending his child. He was a force whose reach extended across finance, law, media, and public perception. And the airline had just made the mistake of challenging him. In the boardroom, decisions were being debated, votes cast, but each movement was cautious, tentative. Every executive understood that one misstep now could provoke further consequences. Meanwhile, social media continued its relentless amplification. Every network, every platform, every outlet was dissecting the incident. Legal analysts debated potential lawsuits. Parenting experts deconstructed the flight attendant's actions. Business commentators speculated on Daniel Carter's next move. Daniel, however, acted quietly and methodically. He issued directives to his advocacy team: track all airline communications, anticipate PR statements, and prepare countermoves. He instructed his legal team to draft letters to regulatory authorities outlining the airline's failures in employee conduct, child safety protocols, and customer protection. He coordinated with financial analysts to model the potential long-term impacts if Altair failed to comply with his demands. By the next morning, Altair's board was in full crisis mode. Emergency meetings stretched into hours, with advisors constantly monitoring live footage, social media reactions, and internal leaks. Employees whispered in hallways, fearful of the invisible force that had disrupted the entire corporate hierarchy. Vanessa Clark, once authoritative and confident, had been removed from the public eye entirely, her suspension a small gesture in comparison to the global scrutiny she faced. The CEO, pale and exhausted, addressed the board. We must take decisive action. Not reactive gestures, but strategic steps. We cannot afford further missteps. The public and Mr. Carter are watching every move. The PR team recommended a high-profile public apology combined with a full audit of training and conduct policies. The legal team recommended simultaneous engagement with regulators to preempt lawsuits. Executives debated the optics, the wording, the timing. Every detail was vital. A misstep could escalate the situation beyond control. Meanwhile, Daniel remained outside the public eye, quietly orchestrating the unfolding narrative. He didn't need to scream or demonstrate his power. The viral video, the market reactions, and the airline's own panicked responses did all the work for him. He was already planning further measures, public safety initiatives, corporate training reforms, and legal oversight that would ensure the airline could never repeat the same mistake. Each step was calculated, precise, and invisible to the public until the results appeared. By midday, major media outlets ran comprehensive analyses. Headlines highlighted the unprecedented financial leverage wielded by a single individual in response to a child being assaulted mid-flight. Viral hashtags trended worldwide. Public outrage grew, yet admiration for Daniel's measured response spread equally quickly. Parenting blogs, business magazines, and social commentators dissected every element: the slap, the faint blood, the father's calm authority, and the cascading financial consequences. Inside Altair, panic morphed into action. Policies were rewritten on the fly. Legal teams drafted formal statements of accountability. Employee training programs were scheduled for immediate review. The airline scrambled to regain control, but the damage was indelible. The world had already seen the truth. A child had been assaulted, and the power to correct it belonged to the father. And Daniel? He watched, unmoved, confident, and precise. For him, this was never about public spectacle. It was about principles. Boundaries had been withdrawn in a heartbeat. Yes, but the real impact was far more profound. Corporate culture had been exposed. Authority had been challenged. And now, the world had learned that some boundaries, when crossed, would provoke consequences far beyond expectation. Ava, safe and unaware, played quietly in her father's presence. Her lip had healed, the smear of blood only a faint memory. But in the quiet of their home, the lesson was clear: power without accountability is fragile. And one small girl had, unwittingly, reminded the world of that truth. Day 3 after the incident began with the unmistakable hum of chaos. Alteris Air's headquarters looked less like an office and more like a command center under siege. Phones never stopped ringing. Staff ran back and forth between conference rooms. Screens lining every wall displayed live feeds from every angle. CCTV footage of the flight. Social media platforms trending the hashtags #FlightSlap and #CarterIntervention. News channels dissecting the moment the 6-year-old girl's lip was grazed, and every tweet, post, or comment speculating on the $800 million withdrawal. The boardroom, normally a sanctuary of executive confidence, had transformed into a battlefield. The CEO, exhausted from 2 straight nights of emergency meetings, sat at the head of the table, pale, wringing his hands as his advisors briefed him on every new development. Lawyers stood by with printouts of potential liabilities. Lawsuits pending from passengers who felt unsafe, regulatory inquiries already underway, internal complaints filed by employees questioning management oversight, and even early investor threats. One senior legal counsel leaned forward, eyes cold and unyielding. "We have to assume multiple lawsuits are imminent. This isn't a minor incident. A child was struck. That's assault. Video evidence is indisputable. Public opinion will support the victim, not the airline. Every move we make now will be scrutinized under a microscope." The PR director interjected, desperation creeping into his voice. "We've issued statements and a formal apology, but the public doesn't care. They've seen the video. The apology feels performative. We need something more tangible, but time is slipping away." The CFO, normally reserved and analytical, slammed his palm on the table. "Our stock is plummeting. Market confidence is eroding. Analysts are forecasting further losses if we don't show decisive action. We're hemorrhaging credibility and cash simultaneously." Meanwhile, in a quiet, secure location miles away from the chaos, Daniel Carter was reviewing the situation with clinical precision. He wasn't reacting emotionally. He was strategizing. Every move by Alteris Air, every public statement, every hesitated apology fed into his larger plan. He had already neutralized the $800 million liquidity injection, ensuring that the airline's financial operations would feel the impact immediately. But the withdrawal of capital was just the first layer of a far more sophisticated approach. Daniel's legal and advocacy teams had already been mobilized. Internal corporate documents, emails, and policies were being analyzed for procedural gaps, employee conduct standards, and regulatory compliance issues. Every misstep in Alteris Air's governance structure was being cataloged, mapped, and assigned a potential corrective action. His strategy was not reactive, it was preemptive, ensuring that no similar incident could ever occur without consequence. Back at the airline, employees whispered in hushed tones. Fear had replaced authority. Staff members were afraid of making even the smallest mistake. Training sessions were called on the fly, but no one could instruct employees on how to handle the unique situation they were facing. A single individual with both the moral high ground and the financial power to destabilize the company completely. Vanessa Clark, the flight attendant at the center of the incident, had been moved into a private, secure office under constant observation. HR personnel, legal counsel, and crisis managers surrounded her, but even their presence couldn't protect her from the weight of reality. Her hands trembled slightly as she adjusted her uniform, eyes darting nervously to the screens tracking the viral video. "I was maintaining order," she repeated, voice quivering. The child, she was disruptive. A lawyer's gaze pierced her. "A 6-year-old child, Miss Clark. You struck her. There's visible injury. You have no defense. This is assault, plain and simple. And now, the world is watching." The public was relentless. News outlets ran 24-hour coverage, looping the clip of the slap, analyzing it frame by frame. Parenting experts, corporate analysts, and business commentators debated endlessly. Some focused on the act itself, the abuse of authority consequences, marveling at how Daniel Carter could manipulate corporate operations with a single phone call. and still others speculated about the cascading ripple effect of one small, but visible, act of injustice. In the quiet of his home office, Daniel coordinated with his teams. "We need to prepare for Altair's next move," he instructed. "Track their communications, anticipate PR statements, draft responses to regulatory inquiries. Ensure that any public engagement aligns with our objectives. And most importantly, maintain public visibility of accountability without revealing our own hand." By the fourth day, Altair's board convened an emergency session in a secure conference room. Every executive, from department heads to senior counsel, was present. The atmosphere was tense, suffocating. The CEO opened the meeting, his usual composure replaced by visible anxiety. "We must act decisively," he said. "This is no longer just about PR. It's legal, financial, and reputational. The world is watching." The CFO presented a new report, showing projected losses if social media outrage continued. Stockholders were already reacting negatively. Analysts were issuing warnings. Every delay in response magnified the potential damage. The CEO nodded but remained silent. He understood that any decision would be second-guessed, no matter how measured. The PR director, sweating under the pressure, suggested a high-profile public apology coupled with a full audit of policies, training, and conduct standards. Legal teams recommended simultaneous engagement with regulators and advocacy groups to preempt lawsuits. Every executive debated the optics, timing, and language of public communication. Every word mattered, every second counted. Meanwhile, Daniel quietly orchestrated the unfolding narrative. He didn't need to appear publicly. He didn't need to threaten. The viral video, market reactions, and Altair's own internal panic ensured that his authority was understood universally. Yet he was already preparing his next moves, launching public safety initiatives, proposing corporate training reforms, and establishing regulatory oversight to ensure that Altair could never repeat such a mistake. Social media continued its relentless amplification. Viral hashtags spread across platforms. News outlets dissected the event endlessly, and public discourse became a mixture of outrage, fascination, and admiration for Daniel's measured response. Parenting blogs analyzed the incident as a case study in authority and restraint. Business analysts discussed the unprecedented influence an individual could exert over corporate structures. The entire world was watching, and every movement by Altair was scrutinized in real time. Vanessa Clark, isolated in her office, began to unravel. Once confident and authoritative, she now understood the full magnitude of what had happened. Her career, reputation, and personal life were all at risk. Internal HR and legal teams meticulously documented her actions, building a case that would be used not just for disciplinary measures, but for permanent reforms across the airline. By the fifth day, the CEO publicly announced a series of measures. Vanessa Clark was suspended indefinitely. The airline would conduct a comprehensive review of all training protocols, and new policies would be implemented to ensure passenger safety and proper employee conduct. But the public was not appeased. The viral video had already become emblematic of corporate overreach and failure. Critics called for more accountability, questioning whether a suspension was sufficient. Daniel, observing all of this, remained calm. Each corporate response, each public statement, each media analysis played into his broader strategy. The withdrawal of $800 million was a signal, but the long-term plan involved permanent cultural reform within the airline, stricter training, clear boundaries for employees, transparent accountability, and a precedent that no act of authority over a child would go unchecked. In the quiet of his home, Daniel reflected on the events. Ava, oblivious to the viral storm, played quietly at his side. The smear of blood on her lip had healed, but the lesson remained. Power without accountability is fragile. And one 6-year-old girl, through a moment of vulnerability and innocence, had reminded the world of that truth in the most undeniable way. The next phase would be even more intense. Daniel planned to ensure that Altair would not only publicly reform, but also internally restructure, with permanent oversight and systemic safeguards. The airline's boardroom collapse, media frenzy, legal maneuvering, and Vanessa Clark's personal reckoning were only the beginning. The world watched, captivated, and Daniel Carter remained unseen, precise, and unstoppable, a force reshaping corporate conduct with a single, quiet authority that left no room Air was in full-scale crisis mode. The boardroom, once a symbol of control and authority, now felt like a courtroom. Executives argued over every decision, their voices rising as panic threatened to overtake rational thought. The CEO, exhausted and pale, tried to mediate, but the tension was palpable. Legal counsel reminded them repeatedly that the airline was facing potential lawsuits, regulatory scrutiny, and severe reputational damage. Investors were calling every hour, demanding answers, threatening to withdraw support. Meanwhile, the viral video had become a global phenomenon. Clips replayed endlessly. The 6-year-old girl, Ava, wide-eyed and stunned, the faint streak of blood at her lip, the calm authority of her father, Daniel Carter, and the visible panic of the flight attendant, Vanessa Clark. Memes, opinion pieces, news commentary, and viral threads flooded the internet. Every angle was dissected. Everyone had an opinion. Vanessa Clark, now fully aware of the consequences of her actions, had retreated into isolation under supervision of HR and legal teams. 15 years of professional pride had dissolved into fear, shame, and anxiety. The suspension was indefinite. Internal reviews documented her actions meticulously. The weight of public scrutiny pressed on her like a physical force. She understood she had crossed a line that could never be erased. Daniel Carter, however, remained calm and deliberate. Every public outrage, every social media spike, every panicked corporate decision played into his broader strategy. He wasn't seeking revenge. He wasn't performing for the cameras. He was enforcing a principle: no child, no individual should ever suffer abuse under the guise of authority without accountability. From his secure location, Daniel coordinated with legal, advocacy, and financial teams. Letters to regulators were prepared, outlining systemic failures in employee conduct, safety protocols, and corporate governance. Publicly, he stayed silent, letting the world witness the unfolding consequences. Privately, every action was precise, calculated, and layered to ensure lasting reform. By the end of the week, the airline had enacted sweeping measures. All flight attendants underwent retraining on passenger conduct, especially concerning minors. Emergency protocols were rewritten. Employee accountability measures were formalized and made publicly available. Board members were briefed on the failures that had led to the incident, and permanent oversight committees were established to prevent recurrence. Financial safeguards were implemented to prevent mismanagement or miscommunication from escalating into another crisis. The media continued to analyze every detail. Parenting blogs praised Daniel's measured authority. Business outlets dissected the unprecedented financial leverage he had demonstrated. Social media continued to buzz, but the narrative had shifted. This was no longer just a viral incident. It had become a global case study in accountability, authority, and power. Ava, in the quiet of her home, remained blissfully unaware of the viral storm. The faint trace of blood on her lip had long since healed, leaving only a memory of the incident. But in that memory, Daniel had ensured she learned the most important lesson of all: boundaries matter, and authority without accountability is fragile. The airline, battered and humbled, emerged changed. Employees, from senior flight attendants to executives, carried a renewed awareness of responsibility and the consequences of crossing moral and ethical lines. Vanessa Clark, meanwhile, faced a future permanently altered, her career a cautionary tale for others. Daniel Carter's action had not been loud or theatrical, but it was absolute. One slap, one phone call, one principle defended, had reshaped an entire corporation and captivated the world. He had demonstrated that quiet authority, backed by decisive action, could enforce change far more effectively than outrage or aggression. And the world had watched. A 6-year-old girl, a tiny smear of blood, a father's calm resolve, and an $800 million consequence. The story had it all. Power had met principle, and principle had won. The lesson was clear. In a world where authority often goes unchecked, accountability is not optional. It is absolute. And one moment, seen by millions, can change everything.